Welcome back. It's starting to seem like we are growing more divided from our nation's police force every day. But is it really fair to say that we're at war with our law enforcement officials? Colin, what are your thoughts?
I think that because of the news media cycle that we live through, we have a very polarized view. Do we have an issue with certain segments of society that are overly racist? Absolutely, and that covers law enforcement. But let's be frank about this. And I know a lot of law enforcement officers. If you're working in Washington, D.C., and you're covering the 7th District, which is Anacostia, where if you're a white person, especially a white police officer, and you go into any of these neighborhoods, you're getting called everything from the top down. There's no respect for law enforcement in a lot of areas. It is a much more complicated issue when you have popular culture that glorifies violence, when you have a certain cultures in certain areas or certain groups that glorifies a particular lifestyle that disparages respect for authority, that disparages respect for law enforcement. They have a very difficult job to do, and I think 99% of cops out there do very well in the environment that they're put into. Are there some bad seeds? Yes. But we shouldn't castigate. Society doesn't work if we don't have law enforcement. Without police, we have anarchy. Do we need to reform police? Perhaps, but we need to understand that in order for society to function, in order for us to uphold the laws that we agree as a group that we need to live by, we need somebody to enforce those laws.
And I agree with you. And what I think is frustrating is it seems like the parts of the population that are, involved with these police protests and things like that, they think that the world would be better without cops. I don't understand that logic because, as you said, society can't operate without cops.
Right,
So,
and you don't have, in these areas, and a good example would be Baltimore. So what happened after the Freddie Gray incident initially, where police basically pulled back, right? They just stopped
they had to.
doing their job at 100%, they started doing it at 80%. Crime went through the roof. These communities are not self-policing, or they're not self-policing efficiently. You need to have a law enforcement that's trained and that is equipped to deal with crime issues. Now, again, is there room for reform? Absolutely, but we need to change the entire conversation, right? We need to step back from this war on cops and figure out from both sides. And a lot of these issues, of course, from a political standpoint, it's very easy to say that this group is wrong or that group is wrong. We're dealing with some very deep-seated issues.
Well, one of the biggest issues that happened, I've kind of shared a little bit with Mary back a couple months ago. You have a First Amendment right, a First Amendment and a Second Amendment. The Second Amendment people are yelling at the First Amendment people. The First Amendment people are yelling at the Second Amendment people. And it's all getting caught in a crossfire. And in that crossfire, Second Amendment people they categorize everybody that's got a First Amendment right as a liberal, and the First Amendment right categorize the Second Amendment right as right-wing or right-wing conservative. So we're in a contest against each other.
Well, and it's
Police are caught in the middle.
And ultimately, and I think you're absolutely right, and this is one reason I enjoy my particular feelings on the Second Amendment, because they tend to confuse people tremendously. But it is a result of how much we have simplified the political nuance of our system, right? And you're absolutely right. We think of First Amendment people as being bleeding liberals. We think of Second Amendment people as being conservatives. Yeah. The reality is all of our civil rights are equally important.
Yes.
And they all exist for a reason. So somebody believing in one and not believing in the other is not right. They're choosing a particular opinion. But I don't necessarily think, I think that again, and this is something I say time and time again, and I sound like a broken record, we have a population in this country that is basically uneducated on issues. They respond to keywords, and this is a perfect example in this particular case. Everybody was up in arms about the cops. Oh, the cops are bad, they're shooting people. Then we have these mass shootings of cops in Dallas and in Baton Rouge. Then suddenly it's, whomever else is bad and cops are good. Okay, well, you just said the exact opposite 2 days ago. Have some consistency, pick a middle ground, have a rational view of how things are working.
Well, and don't make huge issues out of small issues, and don't, for God's sake, don't report until you have the facts. because that is the biggest issue. And also, quite frankly, the problem in my mind is the fact that the cops are in some cases, in some communities, rightfully scared of what could
Absolutely.
happen to them. And that's going to increase their propensity to make mistakes.
You think maybe one of the problems is the only way you win this thing is for a good guy to have a gun to compensate the bad guy that's got a gun? Is that working for us?
No, I'm not saying that's it
Well,
at all.
no, is that working for
Yeah,
us?
well,
Is the carry law in Baton Rouge a good thing to have somebody going down the street carrying with a weapon over your
the reality of the matter is that's not going to resolve anything. And I think, that's something that deserves a lot more nuance because that can be overly simplified on both sides.
When
do you
we
really
talk about it? When do we talk about it? When do we get into all of these things, and when do we talk about it?
I think it's deeper than just having the right to carry or the right to say how you feel. We're talking about, like you said earlier, Colin, like deep-seated hatred. Okay, this is not just the First Amendment or the Second Amendment.
And what is the source of that? Because quite frankly, in my mind, the
Ignorance.
hatred has grown with this current president and this current administration. My opinion. But the other thing that I would say is that when I get stopped by the police, and I haven't been stopped for a while, thankfully, and I hope not to get stopped for another long while, but the last time I got stopped, here's my reaction. It's night. I pull over as quickly as I can. I turn the lights on in my car, and I put my hands on the top of the steering wheel after I roll down the window.
In all fairness, and I will tell you, and I can give you personal anecdotal evidence for this, there is, in some situations, a complete different reaction. You're a middle-aged white guy. If you did exactly the same
I would have never
things,
guessed that.
if you did exactly the same things and were a teenage black guy, would you get exactly the same reaction?
I don't know. But I would hope from
and
the
I'm not
majority
saying
of
I'm not
police
saying
you
that
would.
I don't want to make that as a general statement because it shouldn't be a general statement. I think there is some validity to thinking that sometimes that does play a role into the equation.
It's really hard, in my opinion, if you show that, and you may disagree. When I got pulled over coming out of HCC, headed home from teaching a class, and I have no idea why they stopped me. They had another cop there, and I don't know what they were looking for, but there was nothing to be found. But I did the yes, sir, and no, sir, and then when I got done with it, I talked to the sheriff the next morning and said, what the heck was up with this? So I got my opinion, but I didn't do it with the officers that were on scene. I showed respect. They showed respect back.
And
we
there's
got on
no,
with our
and there's,
business.
and I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think, however, my point in making what I said earlier is, given exactly the same set of circumstances and exactly the same reaction, in some cases, there's a different opposite reaction based on who the person being stopped
And
is.
that's possible.
Maybe in some situations, but I don't think that it happens in as many situations as certain groups
No, of course not. Of
society
course
are making
not.
it out to be. And I also think that the media has a huge role to play in this and with what kind of stories they're
They want their
either
ratings.
Well, see,
showing.
now
Are
we're
they
back to
showing-
First Amendment. We're back to the First Amendment. They're
No.
reporting.
Well,
That's their job.
right,
We're
and I
reporting.
agree
No,
with
their
that.
job is to make money.
Well, isn't
Well,
everybody's?
Yeah.
And
I mean, what I was just going to say is, of course, I don't want them to, bury the truth or anything like that. But what I would like to see is, some positive stories highlighted. Someone shared on Facebook recently there was going to be a Black Lives Matter protest. I think it was in Kansas, and organizers of the event ended up meeting with the police chief in Wichita, and they ended up having like this kind of block party barbecue dance fest with like Black Lives Matter protesters and police officers.
Well, and
and
they
it
did
turned
that-
into this, celebratory event. That's what I want to see on the news more, not violent protests,
And-
people shooting each other. I mean, people, they need to see an example to follow. That's the kind of example
Now,
that people need to follow.
I want to follow with what you said and what you said. You used Obama's name.
I think he's
I
the
would
current
not.
president.
I would yield to saying this. We must use the word NRA, the National Rifle Association. Every time you say the president's name, I'm going to use the NRA. They need to come to the table and deal with the National Mental Health Alliance to see how can we have a rapport on dealing with people that shouldn't have weapons. Not take weapons away, but actually be a part, like hospice, like breast cancer, like so many different things. The NRA could become a positive force instead of just coming up like bulldogs in opposition to
But
everything
the,
that's
but the
being
opposition
said.
are coming up like bulldogs.
Well,
So,
and let me
does that make it right?
Well, you know what? At some point, you've got to fight back.
Is it
Let me
working
jump
what we're
in.
doing?
But I don't think the other thing works, and I think Chicago proves that. They've
But
got the
always, that's a
strictest-
buzzword too. Chicago's a buzzword.
But it's
That's
true.
A political
It's fact.
buzzword.
Let
How
me
about
jump in
Washington?
for a second, though. Here's the thing. We have rights, and we have rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution. Having a right and exercising that right responsibly are two different things. Just because we have a right doesn't mean we can be irresponsible in the exercise of that right, and that applies to the First Amendment and applies to the Second Amendment. You're absolutely right, Ron. The NRA, as much as the anti-gun lobby, they're both equally guilty because you have people, and Maryland is a great example of this, and you and I are both military men.
Yeah.
You know full well that if you look at the Maryland list of banned weapons, you can buy an AR-10, which is a 7.62 by 5.1, so 308.
Yes.
Exactly the same weapon as an M4 or an AR-15. You can buy that, but you cannot buy an AR-15 because it's viewed as a scary military weapon. There's no logic
But here's
to the weapon. No, let me finish.
okay. We've got 30 seconds.
The NRA equally is irresponsible in that we should have better background checks. We should have integration. We should be able to maintain records for people who should not own weapons. We shouldn't destroy the record of any interaction that occurs with NCIS, which is a horrible failure because it is understaffed to a large degree because of the current administration. We shouldn't have to destroy those records after 30 days. We should be able to keep that information and have a more streamlined process. Maryland does a great job with checking backgrounds for regulated weapons, and I would like to see that system go national.
My point is, Black lives matter, blue lives matter. Let's reframe the question.
All lives
What
matter.
lives don't matter?
That's good. We could keep talking about this for probably
Yeah, you-
hours, but let's not. Next up on the flip side, is media violence bad for kids? Our panel has the details